Well, I'm going to begin, Mick, by just like, this is the first movie you've directed in 14 years, I believe. I was just wondering what it was about this particular story that inspired you to get back in the director's chair for a cinematic piece.
It's the first movie I've directed in a long time. I went through a period living in the States where it seemed that every feature director was moving into television because there were HBO and Showtime, places like that, doing really, really interesting things and interesting subjects. So I worked in TV for a while. I did TV movies like Temple Grandin. I love movies that are actually about something, and I try and do entertainment movies in between. But a movie like this is actually about something that's. It was always going to be timely in the world to do something about political lying. You're lying for ideological or political reasons, and this story about the Holocaust was a very good way of not just dealing with the intimate facts of this story, but dealing with climate change and denial of evolution, claiming there's widespread voter fraud, all kinds of denial of the world that we live in. And in the last few weeks, it's become increasingly, intensely topical. Just in the last few days, the President's counsellor has used a phrase like alternative facts to describe something that the President and his press secretary had said that was at odds with what everybody could see with their own eyes. So this is a very topical movie, and I felt a very strong emotional connection to the fact that it was a Holocaust denial movie. I'd been, many years ago when I worked for the BBC in London as a documentary filmmaker, I'd been to Auschwitz and shot a now famous scene there of somebody stepping into a pond that had human ashes flushed into the bottom of it and taking a handful of them. And I rehearsed that scene and did that myself. So that was kind of an electric moment for me that came back vividly, even though that was 40 years ago, when I read the script. And I thought, well, that's the world that we're visiting. And I felt very angry, as some of the characters in this movie feel, at the fact that such an obvious reality should be denied and said, called a hoax or a myth.
At the same time, to sort of serve this as a piece of cinema, was it still important that you did have to ask all the questions and then answer them within the movie, in a sense that, even though we do adopt her perspective, it does feel like this is a court case that is sort of taking a step back and listening to both sides. I mean, was that quite important still to have, just for the sake of having a movie that has suspense?
I think we try to upend the normal conventions of a movie in this one. The conventions of something like, for example, a very good movie, Erin Brockovich. Julia Roberts starts as a face in the crowd, not particularly notable, just a single mother. And through the course of the movie, she confronts huge forces ranged against her. She grows in stature and confidence and articulation, and she becomes an articulate voice. She didn't have a voice to begin with, and she now has a voice at the end. She makes grand speeches, and everybody applauds and jumps up and down in the theatre. This was the opposite of that, and it had to be the opposite of that because that was the truth. This was about a woman who started out as being, a can-do woman, articulate, feisty, passionate, very good at expressing herself, very knowledgeable, and she goes into this courtroom situation where she's asked suddenly to be silent. So it's going the wrong way for a movie, and yet you have to try and make something dramatic out of that. You have to make that into an act of self-denial on her part. So the title denial has two meanings there. And in that act of self-denial, she's being the opposite of David Irving. He denies the truth to serve himself and his ideas, his ideology. And she denies herself to serve the truth, so she's going the opposite way. So it's a very nice thing. And the fact that she bonds through the movie with someone she thinks in her legal team is actually as much the enemy as David Irving, because they seem cold-hearted and logical where they should be emotional and passionate. And she discovers that Richard Rampton, the Tom Wilkinson character, is in fact, under that restrained British surface, as passionate as she is, and he's her champion and wins the case for her.
What's that nice blend is they sort of coming at it from an intellectual point of view, and she's very much an emotional standpoint.
Very much an emotional person, and so for her to be in the courtroom, be told be quiet, is like murder. That's torture for her. She wants to stand up and confront him and say, "You lied," all the rest of it. She can't do that because they tell her quite rightly, if you do that, it's confusing. It makes the trial about you. He'll bring up everything you ever did in your life that you don't want brought into court or whatever. it should be about him and his lies. If we take you out of the equation, then the trial focuses on him. Likewise, if you bring witnesses, survivors from the concentration camps into court, he will play on their faulty memory. These aging people are going to die soon, and maybe they can't remember whether the door was on this side, or can't remember in the confusion what happens, and he will reduce them to tears because they can't remember in the witness box. That's not going to do your case any good. So they're not going to give evidence either.
Do you think we could learn something from the way the legal team approaches this, in the sense that we're not giving, what they're trying to do and avoid is giving him this platform for him to sort of has this whole kind of show and kind of gain a kind of following off the back of it, which these days, if you look at how some of the kind of political commentators and people like Farage, people like that are always on the television and and got their own radio shows. Do you think we could learn a bit from just saying, sort of subduing them and not giving them this kind of moment in the spotlight?
I wish we could put all of them in a courtroom with Tom Wilkinson. Because, I mean, there's something about a courtroom, you can't escape from it. It's not that the doors are locked, but you are in a box there, in a witness box or wherever, and you are forced to testify, and you are forced to answer questions. And you can't suddenly make a witticism that sends a crowd of 10,000 people roaring and cheering and get out of it that way by changing the subject. You can't change the subject. The judge is saying, you must answer the question, Mr. Irving. Or the barrister, Tom Wilkinson, is saying, well, you said this on one occasion, you said this on another occasion. They're two different things. Were you lying that time or are you lying this time? And you have to answer that question or show that you are lying by trying to wriggle out of it. I wish we could do something like that in our political lives. Maybe there's some real-time form of fact-checking where someone who's frequently on TV, if they're saying in the middle of a rally something is the opposite of what they said before, and they say, no, I didn't say that, you have a little box with them, a picture of them in the corner of the screen saying what they said they didn't say before. To make it happen in real time for the same audience that's watching, as if they were in a courtroom. That might be something we could try.
I'd be keen on that. Well, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey You